Welcome to The World Unraveled with Brandon Kinnig. It has been a couple of weeks since I've last recorded a podcast. I was traveling outside of the country to Europe and also my first trip to North Africa. And I will do a separate podcast on some of my learnings and takeaways from that trip. I came away with much expanded knowledge and greater cultural understanding, as well as historical insights, particularly when it came to Morocco, which is where I visited in North Africa. But for now, I want to focus on the events of the last couple of weeks. There's another assassination attempt on former President Trump today by what appears to be a lone wolf actor, somebody who was very much opposed to Trump, but also had a lengthy criminal rap sheet, many felonies, and was very fixated on Ukraine. The suspected gunman apparently was known very well known to the police department. So we're in this age of uh, increased attempted assassination attempts on presidential candidates. Currently, Trump has faced two, although there have been numerous threats against Kamala Harris as well. And unfortunately, the rhetoric has not abated that we've seen happen. And a lot has happened. So, coming off of her Democratic National Convention, Kamala Harris gave a very rousing speech that spoke to the middle centrist Americans, trying to unify, broaden her coalition, which was something Trump had failed to do at his convention. And I want to talk about foreign interference in our elections with some high profile cases that we've seen recently. But before I get into that, I know this is a show where we focus on international events, but I think it's critical to talk about the debate, particularly because the next president will have a profound influence on what occurs in the rest of the world, particularly when it in regards to foreign policy and American policy at a time when China is on the ascent and is engaging in very bellicose conduct, particularly in the South China Sea, but also as far as uh, spying and going after assets in other countries, which I'll get into a couple of examples of that, and Russia, the threat that we face from an ascendant Russia under Putin, trying to rebuild the Russian Empire, the invasion of Ukraine. So there are a lot of threats in the continued march towards autocracy in much of the world as Western democracy tries to beat that back. And the stakes cannot be higher in this election just due to the fact that Trump has parroted Putin's talking points, has talked about withdrawing from NATO, has openly speculated on not coming to the aid and defense of Taiwan against China. And so we have to take into account uh, his former presidency as well as what he is saying now, and realize that the threat level in terms of our not only our democracy but also democracy around the world is stark, especially with Trump possibly gaining power. This may be the only debate that Trump and Harris have. Trump has lost it pretty in resounding fashion and indicated immediately that he wasn't open to any further debates, that was it. Now, you take that with a grain of salt. Trump changed his mind 3 or 4 times about this last debate. He often will go back and forth, but it is telling that in all of the flash polls, Kamala Harris won. She was able to bait Trump pretty well and get under his skin, particularly on the issue of crowd sizes on January 6th, on abortion. He went right into a tirade where he attacked her crowds and basically said they were fake, and he had the largest crowds ever. And of course, one of the most sensational and at the time very ridiculous sound bites is when he just immediately went into this conspiracy theory from Springfield, Ohio, about Haitian immigrants eating dogs, eating cats. He said they're eating all of the pets, they're eating all of the dogs, they're eating all of the cats. It was really surreal to hear a president um, parrot just a wild, debunked claim that was made online and that a handful of people had made on television. Uh, and the city manager came out, the police department came out and said there's no cases of people eating dogs and cats. And again, this is from a tired playbook to keep the discussion on immigration. JD Vance was on one of the Sunday morning shows just a day ago and basically said we have to make up stories to get the media to focus on immigration. So fully admitted to making this up. The Haitian immigrants that are in Springfield, Ohio, are not illegal. They are legal refugees coming from a very war-torn country, much like refugees that we accepted after the Korean War, after the Vietnam War from Vietnam, Afghan refugees that we accepted during the 21 years of the War on Terror. And so for Trump and JD Vance to demagogue this and conflate it with illegal immigration and basically just dump it all in the same bucket, and then to rely on just very ugly stereotypes. First claiming that the Haitian immigrants were eating ducks. That was the original, and then they extrapolated it to dogs and cats. And when David Muir, who was the host of the ABC debate, called Trump out on it, Trump said, "Well, I saw it on television." And it's beyond ridiculous. But unfortunately, this has resulted in real life consequences now, where schools have had to evacuate multiple days in a row due to multiple bomb threats. The local college is scaling back their events, particularly for Haitian students, because of the just immense scale and volume of uh, bomb threats and death threats they've received. So I think that this has completely backfired on Trump and Vance. They started this to focus on illegal immigration, even though this has nothing to do with illegal immigration. The Republican mayor of Springfield, Ohio, has had to completely rebuke and refute their claims. The governor of Ohio, Republican Mike DeWine, has come out very strongly and called all of this garbage and said that it has no place in their community and in their state. But Trump made these claims in the debate, and Harris was pretty strong. Less strong initially, but she got stronger and stronger as the debate night went on. Um, Besides baiting Trump about crowd sizes and abortion and pressing him on abortion, in which he would not answer the question on whether he would uh, veto a national abortion ban if it came to his desk. Clearly, he doesn't want to weigh in on that because he doesn't want to upset the anti abortion, pro life crowd and lose their support. But he also knows that uh, Project 2025 is deeply unpopular with most Americans, and particularly American women who have lived under the repeal of Roe v. Wade, the Dobbs decision, and what that has wrought in places like Texas and Georgia. And Kamala Harris did a very great job of speaking to some of those cases of women who had life threatening pregnancies and were unable to get them terminated or really were at the risk of death and sepsis. before they were able to get help. Sometimes they had to go out of state. She also called Trump out on January 6th and for his inaction. Trump was on the defensive for most of the debate, at least when he was intelligible. And in many cases, he was not. And then she also, I thought, in addition to the economic issues, although they didn't get to spend as much time on economics as I had hoped, she did lay out her plan, particularly tax credits for childcare, tax credits for entrepreneurs, much more of a plan than Trump has. She keenly referred to his tariffs as a Trump sales tax, which I think is a very savvy way to crystallize tariffs in the minds of American people. Tariffs are very wonky and they sound wonky, but really what they are, they're a sales tax. Um, and they impact consumers at the end of the day and cause inflation to increase. And on January 6th, and on the election denialism, when he continued to trumpet the insane claim that his advisors told him that if he got 63 million votes, there's no way he could lose because he got more votes than he did in 2016. Well, yeah, the electorate came out in greater numbers. So both he and Biden got more votes. Biden just got more votes than him. And so when he was continued to fixate on the 75 million votes that he received, well over the 63 million he received in 2016, Kamala Harris' response back, I thought was very good. She said, 81 million people fired you. And then when they talked about character, it was very noticeable that the only world leader that Trump could name that respected him was Viktor Orban, who he referred to as smart and a tough person. So the prime minister of Hungary, who is a budding autocrat and has really set back civil society in Hungary for decades and suppressed free speech, suppressed media, independent media. It's a lot of things that are happening in Hungary are very scary. But it was very telling that, again, Trump tells you who he is. He looks up to people like Orban and Putin and Xi of China. These are strongmen because Trump wishes he could emulate these people. He envisions himself as that type of leader, unconstrained by the U.S. Constitution, as he has said at numerous times that the Constitution should be suspended. So I thought that was interesting. He also, just like the abortion question, would have given an answer on a definitive answer that he would support Ukraine and support their fight to regain their sovereignty. Instead, he just said he would end the war as quickly as possible, and that the war would be over by the time he became president. That is really just code for negotiation with Putin to give Putin large swaths of Ukraine. And that is something that when Putin himself and Russian propagandists talk about ending the war, they talk about in terms of uh, um, finding a peace, ending the bloodshed, um, creating a deal. And that's exactly what Trump said. He had numerous opportunities when he was pressed to say that he would come to Ukraine's aid, and he failed to do so. And Kamala Harris, I thought, called him out on it very well, um, and in ways that had not been done before. And there was also a line too where she talked about meeting with uh, President Zelensky of Ukraine, um, before Russia invaded, trying to come to their aid, Ukraine's aid, very early on. Um, Obviously, Russia invaded. She talks about going to Poland and Romania. She also, I thought, she named specifically the capabilities that we were providing to the Ukrainians. She mentioned the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks. She clearly came prepared. She showed that she is and can be a commander in chief. She knows the details, and I think the details are important when you're running for president. And she also had a line uh, that she said, "What we've done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence is important. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kiev with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland." And then she turned to face Trump and she said, uh, "Why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch?" Very strong line and very critical. Pennsylvania does have a lot of Polish Americans. Something I know as a Polish American myself, the grandson of Polish immigrants to the United States. And I think you have to be very clear-eyed about the ramifications of yielding to Putin and possibility that he would invade Poland, which is a NATO country, or try to then take Polish territory, or the Baltic states, Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia. So many strong points during the debate. Trump faltered, did not do well. The closing, well, before I get to the closing statements, it was also noticeable that Harris looked intently at Trump often during the debate. He refused to even glance her way. Some of her expressions were were priceless. Clearly, she had expressions on her face that at times entailed that she thought he was crazy, that she had no idea what he was talking about, which I thought was very relatable because I think that's how many Americans felt, particularly when he was talking about um, the Haitians coming to eat your dogs and cats, that they're eating pets. And that was just one of many lines. He was also asked about his alternative for Obamacare, which was mostly incomprehensible because he said they decided to keep Obamacare because they didn't have a better plan, even though it's not good, but it's better than nothing. When he was asked about a specific alternative, he essentially said, um, when he was asked about a plan, he said, "We have concepts of a plan." That was also a line besides the dogs and cats line, which I think will become a meme and continue to live on. From a foreign policy perspective, Harris did what she needed to do. She spoke to um, the uh, vital importance of abiding by free and fair elections, having a peaceful transition of power, how that was disrupted by Trump. She spoke to supporting Ukraine, supporting our allies in NATO, coming out strong against autocrats. Trump was unable to do that at any point during the debate. And then when they had their closing statements, Harris focused on turning a page from the politics of the past. She talked about the future. She talked about moving on from Trump, what she wanted to do, run an optimistic campaign with vision. Trump's closing said nothing about what he wanted to do, no plans, no policy. It was just all about Kamala and about how she and the Democrats want to destroy America, then America's in decline, America's failing. Nothing about what he would do if America is in decline, how is he going to revitalize the country? It was extremely negative, and I think just one reason why most of the debate uh, prognosticators and recaps showed that she had won the debate handily. So we'll continue to monitor that as well as the candidates' continued statements as they relate to foreign policy questions, the war in Ukraine, and many other topics. I do want to move or shift just a bit to foreign influence in the American election. We are just 50 days out now from Election Day, and we've seen some very high-profile examples of interference in our elections. Um, and also some just interference by some of our adversaries who are ingratiating themselves in our country. There was a story that did get a lot of attention. Um, from a couple months ago, Linda Sun, who had worked her way up, a Chinese national, who Chinese American had worked her way up to be an aide to the governor, Kathy Hochul of New York. So she was recently indicted and charged with spying for China, essentially working for Chinese interests, basically to propagandize against Taiwan and to advise and strongly push anti-Taiwan initiatives, um, to push the policies of China themselves. The governor has completely disavowed her. She was somebody who had actually, I think, worked for Andrew Cuomo before joining Kathy Hochul's staff very briefly before this indictment happened. But it just goes to show you that, and there's actually a long history of Beijing enticing Chinese Americans to work on behalf of China in the United States to basically further the interest of China, whether that be economic or monetary, as well as propagandize. And the propaganda effort usually comes down to um, disparaging Taiwan, trying to marginalize Taiwan as an entity in the United States, and reduce the assistance that Taiwan can get from public elected officials. So, not unlike the game that Russian propagandists play with trying uh, to disparage Ukraine and further a lot of conspiracies around Ukraine, making them out to be a bad actor, responsible for the war, which is just in crazy on all accounts. But this is happening, and you may recall too. I mean, there's been Linda Sun is a high-profile case. There was also a case several years back. I want to say 2018, with the congressman from California, Eric Swalwell, where he actually had someone on his staff who it was alleged he had an affair with at one point. I think he admitted to that, who was working spying for China, was caught, immediately disavowed. So this happens. I think it's a greater possibility of it happening. Um, we see it happen with members of Congress, staffers trying that are Chinese nationalists trying to ingratiate themselves. But it also happens at think tanks, and it also happens in NGOs and nonprofits. China has leaned in pretty heavily on this tactic, even in academia. There was a professor at University of Kansas who was charged just last year for being a Chinese government agent by the FBI. So that is happening right now. There is also um, concern too with the select Chinese millionaires who are very close to Trump, who are helping to fundraise for him and ingratiate him themselves into the MAGA campaign movement. And so I think all of that has to be looked at with scrutiny and examined, because it is a problem, and it's something we're going to continue to face. But the most recent case involves Russia Today. So the announcement that Russia Today was RT, which is a propaganda outlet for Putin, which is it's basically state-owned media, and has been propagandizing the war in Ukraine since it started. So Russia Today made lucrative payments to an outfit called Tenet Media, which is a far-right network based out of Tennessee, that hosts several podcasters that are well known in the MAGA universe, infotainment universe. And the story here is that RT made lucrative payments to the tune of $10 million total to over the course of a year. They made these payments to um, through a network of foreign shell companies in Turkey, UAE, Czech Republic, and Hungary. And all of this was done with the aim of supporting tenant media's work and shaping their messages and videos. So they picked a handful of podcasters, and those were Tim Pool, Lauren Southern, Dave Rubin, and Benny Johnson. Tim Pool and Benny Johnson are very well known on Twitter, X, as well as YouTube. Very much uh, in the MAGA universe. Tim Pool, oddly enough, had formerly been a liberal Democrat who became MAGAfied within the last couple of years towards the tail end of the pandemic. But what's notable here is that these podcasters were paid essentially to put out videos um, parroting the Russian line on a multitude of issues, mostly Ukraine, blaming Ukraine for starting the war, but also for really just incredible and farcical claims, such as blaming Ukraine for the terrorist attack at the Moscow shopping mall last year, even though that has already been claimed by the Islamic State. Uh, and Ukraine had nothing to do with that. And so anyway, these podcasters were given um, about $400,000 each a month. That comes out to roughly 100,000 for each video they put out to back up um, the Kremlin's propaganda, and they acquiesced. Now, this should have been um, when these podcasters and when Tenant Media was approached with this deal, their antennae should have gone up. Like there should have been some red lights flashing because most of these podcasters, their follower counts are very low. You're talking about like 150,000 people or less, and their average video counts struggle to even get into the six digits. Many of them are 80, 90,000 impressions, which is low. That is not a high number of impressions at all for YouTube content. And the way the videos are monetized um, at the cost per impression level, it's all based on how sticky they are. So some channels will do very well. For example, a channel that may have 150,000 followers, but regularly gets 500 to 700,000 views. That means that they have a very loyal audience. It's a very sticky audience, in addition to be high volume. That channel would get higher cost per thousand impressions of its content, and would be more appealing for buyers, for advertisers, for sponsors. So the fact that these podcasters who were getting very low impression rates on their videos would be approached by Russia today with this astronomical sum. Now, I guess the point is that they weren't told there was Russia today, but the fact that they were being promised this astronomical sum to put out these propaganda videos should have raised a red flag. They were told that the benefactor, the sponsor, was a man named Edward Grigorian, and that he was a Euro-Armenian investor. They actually searched for him. The podcasters said they couldn't find anything online about him, and communications that they received as part of this investment had his name misspelled, I should say, in many cases. The naming was inconsistent. Another red flag. And in fact, they knew this. I mean, the podcasters even referred to their benefactors as the Russians in some of their private conversations. So it's not a question of whether they knew better. They did, um, even though they're playing the victims now. But it's just a case of how easily foreign actors, and in this case, Russia, can manipulate our um, discourse in America. We like to think about or focus on fake bot accounts created by the Russians to divide Americans over race, over ethnicity, over ideology, to incite uh, violence and unrest. And while there are many, many fake bot accounts and many online fake personas, in this case, it was just so easy because Russia Today, all they had to go, all they had to do is go to some willing podcasters and basically say, this is the content we want. We're going to pay you this astronomical sum, and they were able to get these far right wing podcasters to do their bidding. So they didn't even have to go through the trouble of creating fake bot accounts. So I think it's another example of how, in many cases, we are our own worst enemy uh, because there are enough people in our country who are more than fine with being allowed to be puppets for a foreign regime that is completely opposed to our democracy and opposed to what we stand for. And it all comes down to money. And once again, money has bought Americans off. And the question is, will anybody care long term? I hope they do, but I don't know. I don't know that the people who listen to these podcasters would be impacted. I don't know that they're likely uh, to change their thoughts or to rethink how they might be manipulated by some of these influencers that and I use influencers loosely in air quotes, these influencers that they follow on a regular basis. I should say too that, not all of this was just anti-Ukraine or conspiracy theories about Ukraine causing terrorist attacks. A lot of it was obviously anti-democrat. I mean, it's not a surprise that Putin would like Trump in power because he's a useful idiot, and Trump will basically negotiate away Ukraine's sovereignty. But like some of these videos, you read the titles: Democrats make it legal to hide HIV status. DNC offers free abortions, vasectomies to liberals. Far left protests erupt at DNC. Uh, it's all very um, inciting. It's very incendiary, and it's very anti Democratic Party as well. And so it definitely this video content pushes that line, and it's meant to divide. It's meant to incite fear of the other politically, and that's what we've come to see with all of this. So again, it's disturbing, it's frustrating, um, and unfortunately, I don't think we've seen the last of it. We're going to see a lot of this ramp up in the coming weeks as we get closer and closer to election day, and we all just have to hope that at the end of the day, more Americans are smarter and will fight back against this than not. So that was a lot. I do want to take a moment and do a segment that I have spoken about, but I haven't done yet. That's called "Around the World in 60 Seconds," and where I touch on a handful of stories that are happening around the world and give updates as I go across the globe so we can analyze some of the key events taking place around the world that we should know about, we should be following. Maybe we're not as closely because there's only so much um, bandwidth in our news cycle, and our American news is very parochial, very focused on domestic interest and what's happening in our own country. But it's very important to keep up and follow with what's happening across the globe. So, without further ado, I will go ahead and kick this off. And I want to make sure I have a timer started so I don't go too far. So, let's go around the world in 60 seconds. The founder of the online chat app Telegram, Pavel Durov, was arrested in France several weeks ago. And Elon Musk and a lot of the far right wing claim that this was First Amendment being suppressed. But what they failed to realize is that Telegram has long been accused of aiding in money laundering, sex trafficking, racketeering. And so that's really why the founder of the platform was arrested, because he hadn't cooperated with French officials. We move to Haiti, where unrest has continued now for a long time. A 400 strong peacekeeping force from Kenya has been sent in to aid the Haitian government. They were promptly fired upon by gangs in Haiti, which shows that the unrest is still not under control. Hostage was rescued by the Israelis, but three others were, it was announced, were killed by Israeli friendly fire, or I should say, Israeli attempt to go after Hamas. And in the Congo, there's a rape crisis unfolding in Congo's ever increasing civil war. 80% of women in camps for the displaced have been raped in brutal attacks. And it's really, for many of the women, it's a choice between trying to venture out of their homes for food and firewood and risk getting raped, or just wait out the crisis and possibly starve to death. It's a horrific situation. And I am past a minute. So that is the world in 60 seconds with Brandon Koenig. And before I end, the one other thing I want to touch upon as we talk about democracy being in crisis, I think a good example of that is what we saw happen recently in Venezuela, where Nicolas Maduro, the successor to Hugo Chavez, resoundingly lost that election over there. And the election was marred by uh, um, corruption, and Maduro refused to leave office. And what happened was that the opposition candidate um, fled and sought asylum in Spain because Venezuela was going to arrest him. And so he had no other choice if he wanted to continue to be a voice um, for the people that to leave. Um, so he is now in Spain. His VP running mate is still in Venezuela, and so it's uh, really sad actually, because um, this was a chance for Venezuela to move beyond autocracy and actually to enter the uh, nation brotherhood of democracies, but that didn't happen. And Muno Gonzalez fled. It's kind of a limbo situation now. Maduro is still in control, and he has continued to jail supporters of his opponent Gonzalez. And so the question really is now, the United States has applied many more sanctions, but pressure is on the uh, neighbors, Venezuela's South American neighbors in the region, particularly Brazil, Colombia, the large democratic countries in South America, to put pressure through economic blockades, through sanctions of their own, on Maduro to step down. because, I mean, this type of behavior is unacceptable, and Venezuela will never have a functioning democracy as long as um, elections can just be ignored, and political opponents can literally be thrown in jail when they uh, win a legitimate election. So that could be a deeper dive topic actually on what needs to happen, at least as far as the various South American countries, what they need to do to ramp up pressure on Venezuela. But for now, the opponent, the candidate who is running against Maduro, the pro-democracy candidate, is in Madrid, having sought asylum. Well, that is it for today. Appreciate your time as always. Much more to come. Next episode, I'll go into detail on my trip and some of the cultural and historical learnings, and what we can take from that, and and why they matter, and why it matters that we have an understanding of what happens around the globe, and and how critical it is. Just because most of these other people come from countries that have histories that far surpass our own country, and they know their histories, and they talk about events and people and places from 500 years ago and longer, um, with detail as if they just happened yesterday. Where we seem to be so short-sighted, we don't even remember our own history from a couple decades ago, much less being a young country. We should know our history going back 200 years. So that's a tangent, though, that for another day. Thank you for your time. Signing off. Stay well, and we'll talk again soon.